Joining me today is Liz Lazarus, author of Dawn Before Darkness. Dawn Smith, a veterinarian tech living in rural South Carolina, catches her new hot boyfriend in a series of lies and abruptly ends their relationship. He's not happy. He begins to stalk and harass her, forcing Dawn to seek a restraining order. Undeterred, he launches a deeply personal attack, inventing a false scenario to sue for guardianship and conservatorship of Dawn's infirm mother. And just when Dawn thinks things can't get any worse, she's faced with an impossible choice: rekindle the relationship or lose her mother forever. Liz Lazarus, Riveting, as it has been described as a riveting thriller, and it is based on her own harrowing experience battling for the guardianship of her 88-year-old mother. She has an engineering degree from the Georgia Institute of Technology and an MBA from Northwestern's Kellogg Graduate School of Management. Welcome to the show, Liz. Nice to have you on.
Thank you for having me, Kathryn.
Well, this is something I guess I'm making the assumption with the aging population that what happens in your book, which is a novel and not a memoir, um, could happen to many of us. The potential for this happening to us, as you describe it, as the story goes in the book, is a possibility. Maybe something that we haven't thought about, but need to do that now.
That is exactly right. And part of why I wrote it was a cautionary tale. Well, the first reason I wrote it was just writing was cathartic for me because I couldn't believe I was in such a frustrating legal quagmire. And I can tell you more about the backstory. But also my books, all of them, this is my fourth one, tend to have education while they entertain. And though most of my education is about self-protection for women, this is a legal form of self-protection that I never dreamed my mother could be taken away from us and put under the care, and I should say lack of care, of a third party guardian. And
Yeah,
it
I
took
mean, what we
me,
think about, I think, is very often that one's kids, as a social worker, I see this, unfortunately, but kids are taken away from their parents, or kids are taken away from their mothers, but not the opposite.
it's
And
exactly that,
yeah.
right?
So what's the motive? I mean, we haven't, I don't want to tell you the whole, we don't want to give away the whole story, but why what's the motive for doing this, and why is the legal system so inept in terms of handling these kinds of situations?
Well, I can't put myself in the minds of other people, but I will tell you, I spent thousands of dollars, and a lot of people were feeding off of my mother's trust. So I spent thousands to get her out of the system, and all the while, the guardians and the guardian ad litems, and the lawyers and the people fighting me were getting paid. Even the stranger that was fighting me for my mom was charging his legal fees to my mother's trust. So I think, there are a couple other cases actually going on in South Carolina about this. So it's starting to see the light of day that this should not be happening. And just to give you the short backstory, it started with a family member suing for guardianship and conservatorship of mom, and I didn't agree with it. And we went to court, and in a blink of an eye, the judge said, discord in the family, and ruled that mom would go under a third party guardian. And that guardian was not taking care of mom for several years and eventually resigned. And after she resigned, she named a successor guardian. My family member didn't put her hat in the ring to be the guardian. So then it was me, the daughter, fighting this stranger. And we ended up having the judge recuse himself. I ended up getting a new lawyer. We switched towns. We went to a different probate court. And finally, the new judge said, as daughter, I had priority and that nobody could prove that I wasn't competent and willing to do it and not charging and cared for my mother. But it took years and it took thousands. And not everybody has the wherewithal to do that to fight that kind of fight.
Yeah, it's not all only about the money, it's also about your head, about your mental health, and all of that, I'm sure, obviously comes into play, right? When you're struggling to protect yourself and protect your mother. Is it always about the money, or were they judging the way you were taking care of her, or how does that all fit together?
Well, nobody could reproach the care that I was giving her. I was in Atlanta, she was in South Carolina. I would visit her a couple times a month. And before she before that, she used to visit me in Atlanta every quarter, almost every quarter for a couple weeks. So nobody could challenge the care that I was providing. And she was in a facility, she was in assisted living. So I wasn't the primary caregiver. Um, but I think it's about control and power and money. And there is little oversight in the guardianship world. I write in the book, Dawn, my fictional character, who's a vet tech, had to have more training and credentialing to take care of animals than a guardian in South Carolina has to take care of a human being. And really, the only qualification the guardian needed was the appointment by the judge.
So you're at the mercy of the judge, and of course, in the book, you point out too, you're at the mercy uh, of your lawyer. I mean, one really has to make sure they have a lawyer who knows what he's literally talking about and doing and has had experience, because you're talking about this being a cautionary tale.
True. And I've had a couple people in the reviews. I mean, people say it's emotional and it's riveting and it's gripping and it's a hard emotional read. I've had a few people say in the early reviews, well, the legal case doesn't seem possible because Dawn is fighting a stranger for her mother. And I'm like, oh my goodness, if you only knew. I kind of gave it easy to Dawn in the book based on what I had to fight. And it does depend on how good your lawyer is. I ended up having more than one lawyer, and the one I landed with in the end, who I have a dedication to, is the one that finally helped me get mom out of that system.
It's difficult to, I should ask you the question, obviously, but it's difficult to change lawyers when you see that this isn't working or he or she is not doing their job. I mean, what's the process? Because I think, sometimes when people get embroiled in legal battles, it just sort of, it takes on a life of its own. And it's difficult to step back and say, hey, this isn't working. I got to do something differently.
Very much so. And I think, though, if you find that your lawyer, one of them was not being responsive enough and just wasn't taking the case as seriously as I thought he needed to, yeah, so I mean, I let him go. And finding a new one is not easy. I mean, you have to go for referrals and you have to go online for recommendations. And some people didn't even want to touch the case. I had one that I thought was pretty good, and he said, well, he had a family member in the same facility that my mom was in, so he didn't want to represent me. So it was not easy actually to get a lawyer who was willing to help.
So where did you get your support from?
Well, my husband helped. In fact, in the book, he said I should give Dawn a break in the book, and I
Yeah.
said, you know what? You saw I didn't get a break in the real world, so I'm not going to give her a break. And we actually use lawyers in another state to do a search for us and look for some lawyers. But yeah, writing was a support for me too. This is a fictional story, but just getting my frustration on the page helped.
Yeah, well, it was riveting. It kept me up all night, I want you to know.
Oh, well,
Till I finished the book. Yes, yeah, it was great. But it's something that I think I had little knowledge about, and I think this is really, this book is important for that reason, to get the message out there. So, what do you want readers to take away from it? I mean, what should they be doing now? And I keep saying the same thing, maybe, but people live so long. I mean, this is going to happen more often, and people, baby boomers living into their 90s, that kind of thing. So, yeah.
absolutely. Well, and this all started because the family member had mom sign a power of attorney and put her assets in a trust without my knowledge. And, so you hope you don't have a family situation like that. But what could have prevented it, and I say this to all parents, is to get your affairs in order, to list who you want for your power of attorney, healthcare and financial. If you want to do a trust for your assets, decide on that. Decide who you want your personal representative to be, and have a family meeting and discuss what you want with everybody. And if they don't agree, so be it, but at least they've heard your wishes. Because part of what happened in my mom's case, even though she was able to recognize me and she knew where she was, she couldn't always remember what she'd had for breakfast. And when we went to court, she was deemed incompetent. And then her voice evaporated. What she wanted no longer mattered. It was like she was a minor child. So to your point, it's, none of us are getting out of here alive. So
Yeah.
get your affairs in order and make sure that your family knows and that it can't be contested. And all this took me so by surprise that I was on my heels through the whole process.
It's facing our own mortality, and I don't think that's one of our I don't know, one of our areas of expertise when it comes to handling our affairs, especially in our culture. We're, thinking about our own mortality and death. And I don't know what the percentages are. Probably you do, but uh, it's a really small percentage of people who even have wills. Um, and
It's
yeah,
it's shocking that people don't think to do this. And I was on an interview the other day, and the woman was like, "Yeah, I need to go over this with my mother." And she goes, "What am I thinking? I'm in my 50s. I need to do this myself." And I'm like,
yeah.
right. We all think of this event happening years and years in the future, and it's a grace to your family to get your affairs in order because then there's no infighting, and that's what the judge ruled. He said it wasn't because we weren't taking care of mom or making sure she was all right. It was the discord within the family. The same way you brought up earlier, two parents who fight about a child might lose their children to foster care or to another to the system if they can't prove that they can get along.
So the process of writing the book, does it, that was, I'm assuming that was good for you. That was cathartic. Is it also painful? Go on.
It wasn't really painful. It was really more cathartic. And the book actually started as a stalker story. So Dawn, the vet tech, is dating a guy, as you know, and she finds catches him in lies and ends the relationship. And he refuses to accept the breakup and starts stalking and harassing her. And so that part came from a friend who had a stalker. And I ended up interviewing 10 women who had stalkers and combined their stories to make my supervillain. And that's where the book had always intended to go, as I was my fourth book was going to be a stalker story. But then in parallel, I was going through this horrific battle and I thought, you know what? I've got to figure out a way to incorporate this into the book. And then when I made my bad guy sue for guardianship and conservatorship of Don's mom as part of his retaliation, I thought that's it. That's how I combine these two things that are happening, one real, one not real, into my thriller.
What do you think? Yes, because stalker is another one of the themes, obviously. So stalkers, are certain women more vulnerable to stalkers? You're talking about your friend who was an example.
I'm not sure because the women I talked to, one was just a delivery guy that took a fancy to her and wouldn't leave her alone, even let himself into her house. So I don't think she did anything to encourage it. Another one was a woman who was dating a guy and wanted to end it, and he wouldn't accept it. So some of it may be, do you see the red flags early? But some of it is just happenstance. And what I was really surprised by as I talked to these different women was how little the legal system could really do for them. You know, people violate restraining orders. Are they really effective? And in one case, the guy did a counter restraining order and had it work. And so now all of a sudden she's got that on her record. So it was really enlightening to see how hard it is to get rid of a stalker.
Yeah, and that's been for quite a while. I know when I was actually actively doing therapy or counseling, that was always a concern. There was not too, if someone's just stalking you, unless something actually happens, nothing can be done, and nothing is done until after sometimes there's catastrophic things that happened, but not necessarily. But yeah, you have to wait till the stalker actually does something.
It's such a catch-22,
Yeah.
right? Because you don't want them to do something, but for them to do something is really when you start to get the attention that you need. So I I don't know that I have a solution for that, but I did highlight it, and women who have had stalkers that have read the book have said, "Boy, you caught exactly how I felt." Because in my guy, he's so cunning. He knows what he can and can't say to get away with harassing her but without getting arrested. And it was really interesting to see from my friend's viewpoint how her stalker did that.
Yeah. How did the judge, we've been talking about the lawyers. What about the judges? How do they fit into this?
Well, I heard from the second judge who told me when he ruled finally that I would get guardianship of mom that as the daughter I had priority and discord within the family was not a sufficient enough reason to have mom put under a third party. So, the first judge, I don't know what his motivation was, but from what I heard from the second judge and what I've read from legal documents, discord within the family was not a good enough reason to take mom away.
And what about mom? This is you're battling this guardianship of your 88-year-old mother. What was the impact uh, on her?
Well, the really, really sad part is that she was the one that was the most punished because, even though I spent money and time, she was not allowed to leave the facility. So once the guardian was put in place, I was told by this guardian that I could no longer take mom out of the facility. So she was institutionalized. And during COVID, that made it worse. But then once COVID was over, I was still told I couldn't take her out of the facility, like I was some kind of danger to her. And it was infuriating. And on this guardian's watch, my mother, I mean, there were so many things. She had a growth on her forehead that was not treated. I had to persist and persist to get her to medical care. She was injured, permanently crippled in a wheelchair. There was so many things that she was not being taken care of. And I was helpless to do anything about it because I didn't have a legal right to oversee her care. So I was so grateful in the end that the second judge granted me guardianship, temporary as it was, because I would have to go back and ask for full. And for the last part of her life, she passed away in February of 25. I was able to oversee her care. And at the last hearing, when it was a feeding frenzy for who was going to pay for what, for the lawyers and all of that, I thanked the judge. And I said he gave me a gift that I can't repay, that he finally let me oversee her care in the end.
And what about these facilities? Because that's a whole other issue. We haven't really touched on the facilities themselves, which tend to be, and obviously there was a lot about this in the book, but these facilities are really in it, and I'm not saying all of them, but assisted living facilities, nursing care, for the money.
My mother was private pay, so she was she was a good resident for them. She was not on the state, she was a private pay, and some of the help was great, just God, angels on earth. Some didn't care. There was a lot of turnover. I will tell you that when my mom was injured, they wouldn't give me any information about what happened. They first said that she fell reaching for something, and I said that she doesn't reach for anything. That can't be true. And then I found out later, well, she fell in the parking lot at a doctor's visit. And then when I asked her what happened, she told me she fell in the van when the van stopped. And she told me that twice. So, it's a he said, she said, but it was interesting that they wouldn't give me any report of what happened with the accident.
Well, they don't want to be liable, right? They don't want to get involved in a lawsuit.
Right.
And they sort of have, if you have somebody who has some memory issues, they can, like you said, he said, she said, and who are you going to believe? The person who has perhaps dementia or memory loss. It's difficult to prove otherwise,
That's
right?
the thing. You've got a
Yeah.
witness who they can say doesn't have a good memory, but she described everything perfectly, and she did it twice. So two different times. And so I know they didn't give her the credit for knowing what she knew and being articulate. And still, I mean, we would still play games, and she was still there, even though her short-term memory was not there.
But her reasoning power was there. It's not a linear kind of loss of memory.
Yeah,
It's right. You may not
right.
be, remember certain things, but you still, if you're an intelligent person, you still maintain some of that intellect, right? And an ability to reason. At least that's what I've seen in a lot of patients.
Right. And then during COVID, this happened during COVID, so I couldn't get in to help her. I didn't realize that she had been permanently injured until after the restrictions were finally lifted and I could get into the facility and see her. And she had contracture of the legs because of the fall. So her legs were permanently frozen at that point. So COVID was just horrible for taking care of the elderly from a family member standpoint because we couldn't get in.
Do you think she understood what you were trying to do? Like that that a lot of this, the legalities, and it was out of your hands and you really were there for her? Do you think, that's the question.
I tried not to stress her or make her upset her, but I would tell her, hey, I'm fighting to make sure I'm the one that gets to make decisions for you. I'm fighting to make sure I'm the one that gets to take care of you. And she'd say, like, well, why do you have to fight? And I say, well, sometimes the legal system just goes that way. Or, I'm fighting for you to be able to visit me. And she'd say, well, I want to visit you. And I said, I know. So I'm going to keep fighting so that we can make that happen. So I think she knew. And gosh, the sweetest thing was right before she passed. My husband went up to her and said, I didn't know this, but he said, it's okay. I'll take care of her. And I think she knew he was going to take care of me. We had only recently been married. Actually, at that point we were engaged. And she also knew the battle was over because when I finally got guardianship, I told her, I said, it's over. I won. I get to take care of you. So part of me wonders, did she hang on to let me win? And did she hang on to see that I was with someone who was going to take care of me? And then she was finally at peace to let go.
Yeah. Well, that makes sense. She probably did. She was at peace to let go because I was going to say on one level or on many levels, she understood that you were fighting for her.
I think so. And
Yeah.
mom was so smart. She was so smart. So I think maybe she understood more than what I tried. I tried not to upset her. I really did, but I'm sure she understood.
And I think, you had a good relationship with your mother. It makes it probably a lot more difficult if you don't have a good relationship with your mother. You may be a responsible person. You may be, want to do the best you can in terms of one's or your mother's care, but some people don't have the kind of relationship that you had. And so to do what you did, that makes it even more difficult.
It's true. I tell you that my first book was about, and also based on a real story about being attacked in college, and I fought the guy off. And it's a story of where's that line between self-defense and vigilantism. And I had an interviewer ask me, well, which was harder to write about your own attack or write about trying to care for your mother? And I said, actually, for my mother, because I felt so helpless. And with going to court and the judge recuses himself, and then we go to the next court and we didn't have enough time, so we had to reschedule. It just every time something legal would come up, I would get a curveball I did not expect. And you just like, how is this possible? And as you read in my bio, I have an engineering degree, I got an MBA, I spent 20 years at General Electric running a major division. It's like I thought I was smart enough to be able to battle this, and yet I kept finding that I was getting knocked to the ground, and that's why the book, though it may seem frustrating and it may not seem realistic, I'm like, I need people to understand it can happen.
Yeah. And I think you did do that. And frustrating is the word. It is, yeah. It's so I recommend this book, Liz Lazarus. Liz, we only have a couple minutes left. So the title of the book is Dawn Before Darkness. Tell us, we can get it at bookstores everywhere, and where else? What other platforms can we go to for more information about your other books as well as this one?
Thanks for asking. Yes, on my website, which is lizlazarus.com, Lizlazarus, has links to where you can purchase the book. And it's an ebook, audiobook, and paperback. It actually launches on May 26th. So the ebook can be pre-ordered, and then the paperback and audio will be available in less than a week. And we also are doing a giveaway on Goodreads, 100 e-copies. So if you go to Goodreads and look up my name, Liz Lazarus, you can enter for the giveaway, and there's a good chance you'll get one. We decided to max out how many giveaways that we could do because for me, it's just so important that people read this and understand it's a cautionary tale and to get their affairs in order.
Absolutely. It's a great book, Dawn Before Darkness. And thanks so much for being on the show. And yeah, it was a great conversation. And it is a cautionary tale. Um, Unfortunately, I guess, but it's an issue that the time has come. We have to deal with it, right?
Absolutely. And thank you for giving me a voice to talk about it. I so appreciate it.
Thanks, Liz. Joining me today is Dr. Alfie Breland Noble. Her new book is Rise and Thrive, a mental health workbook for youth and for the young person inside all of us. Step into your strength, embrace your brilliance, and rise no matter the challenges life presents. This is Dr. Alfie Breland Noble's heartfelt message to every young person seeking healthy, hope, and belonging. Drawing on 30 years of research, clinical experience, and community work, she leads us a journey of self discovery and growth, blending practical guidance with culturally grounded science rich in heart, history, and humanity. This is a living toolkit for thriving. Dr. Breland Noble, a psychologist, scientist, and mental health thought leader, is founder of the AAKOMA, that's AAKOMA project, and is one of Melinda French Gates' leaders championing innovative solutions to advance the health and well-being of women and girls worldwide. She's a regular media contributor to the Griot, the Today Show, the Breakfast Club, and the New York Times, and many others. Welcome to the show, Dr. Alfie. Nice to have you on.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Well, as I'm reading the intro and we're talking about this is a book for the youth, it's also a book for grown-ups, adults. I did a lot of those. I utilized a lot of those tools in the toolkit, and very interesting. And I even kind of, my partner, I said to him, "You got to try this," which he did reluctantly, but glad that he did. Yeah. So, okay, you've had 30 years of experience, science, a living, breathing toolkit. So let's get into more detail. Exactly what is it? What is the book about? What are all these tools that we have in the book?
Yeah, of course. So thank you for having me. The book is really about putting together a set of practical tips, practical strategies, and the how to's. One of the things I've always said is that it's really important for me to never just tell people what they need to do. It is important for me to give them a roadmap for how they can do it. So, with this book, the goal is really to give you a step by step process for one, understanding your own mental health, two, having tools to help you improve upon, build, and support your mental health. And three, to really use all of that as a mechanism to help you find the best version of yourself. I'm Gen X. I'm of the Oprah generation. So I used to run home from school and watch Oprah. And I remember she used to always talk about living your best life. And I feel like the only way, or one of the most important ways we get to living that best life is by knowing who we are and by embracing and loving who we are. And when you have mental health challenges, that gets in the way of you loving and embracing yourself. So this book is really about helping you walk that path to figuring out who you are and then taking care of that person you are and embracing that person you are.
Okay, so we're trying to find out who we are and embracing that person. How do we do that? What's that first step? How do we become aware of we have issues, we have problems, we have stuff we're not dealing with, and we all do, right? So,
Oh, yeah.
yeah, then what do we do?
I think it really is about starting from a place of we have to start at A. We have to start at one. We have to start at ground zero. And I think for many of us, again, as I said, in my big age, I'm in my 50s. I think many people in my generation, we just kind of went along like we were grinding, we were moving toward our goals, whatever those were. But I don't think that we were encouraged to stop and self-reflect and take a moment to say, who am I? What do I like? What do I dislike? What's important about me? What kinds of things encourage me? How do I feel supported? And so the goal really is to start from a place of self-understanding and self-awareness. We talk about three key things in the book. One of them is self-love. One of them is self care, and another is self efficacy. And the only way we can really get into those aspects of self is by learning a little bit more about ourselves. And we don't learn about ourselves in isolation. Part of what I encourage in the book and what I want everybody to take away from it is that you have loved ones in your life, I hope, whether they're blood relative or not. There's at least one person I hope everyone has in their life who cares about them. And if you can't start from a place of, let me figure this out by myself, maybe you can start from a place of, let me talk to this person in my life whom I trust, whom I care about, and whom I love, and get some guidance from them. get some insight from them, even if the insight that you're getting is about how those people experience you. So once you have a foundation of this is who I am, just from a starting point, this is what I like, this is what I dislike, I think that then gives you a foundation to build upon to help you build that strong sense of self. So step one is really being willing to take a moment to try to learn just a tiny bit more about yourself, whether that's in isolation or whether that's in relation to the other people in your life who care about you. So that's where you have to start.
Dr. Alfie, do you have to have a crisis or a trigger that precipitates, like, what's getting in my way? Stuff isn't working for me. Starting with that, okay, before you jump into all the things that you just described, does it take a crisis or not?
I think it doesn't have to take a crisis. I do think for most people, that's where it starts. You find yourself in a crisis mode. And literally, people think that young people don't have crises. Of course they do. And what's a crisis for one is not a crisis for another. So for a young person, it may be, I'm of the generation where the divorce rate skyrocketed. So I remember everybody around me, parents were either in the process of getting a divorce, were already divorced, and they were really trying to figure out how to cope with that. But there are other things that cause crises for young people. So when I think about the age of, say, 12 to 18, social media is huge. How are people receiving me on social media? How many people are liking my posts? I made this TikTok. Another person made an awful TikTok about me, and now everybody's talking about me in a negative way. Those are crises for our young people. So I think for many people, that's where it starts. A crisis is the first time that they stop to think something doesn't feel right. I want something to be different. But it doesn't have to start there. It can start with a general feeling of, I don't feel like I'm coping well. I feel like I'm struggling. Something just feels off. I mean, there are sort of varied levels to this. And so whatever that entry point is for that young person, and as I say, the person who's young at heart, whatever that entry point is for you, it's okay, but you gotta start someplace. And so, like we're saying, crisis might be it, but crisis might not be it. I don't think there's one right way to start.
But parents, as you're describing it, then parents really need to be vigilant, or whoever's taking care, who the responsible person for the, as you say, somebody in high school, 8 to 18, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's important. Well, it's important for them to read the book and to have an understanding of themselves, also, right? If you're going to be helping your your kids.
I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
And
think you don't have to start from a place of knowing yourself because if we wait for that, I don't think any of us would get anywhere. Do you know what I mean?
no,
Because there's
well,
so
true.
few of us who actually, really have that kind of insight. But I do think it's critical for parents and caregivers because as you said, not everyone who's caring for that young person is a parent. There are lots of folks who are what we call fictive kin, like an auntie or an uncle
Yeah.
or an ate or a Lola. And so just being attentive to what's going on with that young person. I think that's where we as adults and parents and caregivers have to start paying attention to these young people.
Because you talk about parenting in a digital overload era.
Mhm.
And that's a huge, I think that's a very different than, say, I mean, I'm much older than you, parenting your generation, for
Mhm.
instance. That
Mhm.
wasn't one of the issues. And now it's probably the number one issue.
That's right. It is. Oh, absolutely. Digital overload. You're exactly right. So my dad's a boomer. My mom passed away about 20 years ago. But when we were kids, the big thing was who was talking about me at school or, what I mean, who didn't invite me to a party. And
Yeah.
now for these young people, it's not only how are they personally interacting with social media and how are people treating them? Are they being bullied? That kind of thing. It is also world events. I was talking about it with a colleague this morning, my colleague Portia, and we were talking about how there's so much more information coming at these young people from all different sources. So they know what's going on in the world. They know some of the struggles that are happening in different parts of the world. And, what digital media in our electronic age has done is it's really sort of shrunk the world. And so they're so passionate about so many things because they have so much more information. And for these younger generations, Gen Z and Gen Alpha, everybody's an activist. Everybody has a cause that they're passionate about. And that can be challenging when you're also trying to figure yourself out at the same time. So you can't save the world and also save yourself simultaneously. Like it takes a little bit of balance. And so us as adults, grandparents, aunties, uncles, as I said, being attentive, we're there to help our young people navigate those things. And the book is really a tool, one tool in our arsenal. We also have a companion website with videos and downloadables and that kind of thing. I want all of these tools to be accessible enough that any parent or caregiver can grab them, a young person can grab them, and really just begin to sort of dip their toes into the work of taking care of their mental health.
Well, talking about mental health, I want to talk about mental health, how you describe it in the book, how overlapping identities, you talk about race, gender, sexuality, disability, class, actually shape the way young people experience stress, trauma, and healing, because that's critical, I think, to examine.
Absolutely. And part of this comes from my own experience growing up in Virginia Beach, Virginia. I'd like to share with people to give them context. I'm from the same hometown and same generation as Pharrell, the music producer, Pharrell Williams. I'm happy. Chad Hugo, his partner, a Filipino brother. There's a large Filipino population where I grew up in Virginia Beach. Timbaland, the producer. And so Missy Elliott is from a town over. And so growing up in that era, I know what isolation feels like. I watched a lot of kids and I myself experienced the challenge of trying to navigate all those identities in a time when a lot of people weren't talking about things like that. But nowadays, it's everywhere. It's ubiquitous. I think you're sort of behind the times for our young people, Gen Z and Gen Alpha particularly, if you're not able to have these conversations about intersecting identities. And so what's important to me is that every young person, I also run a nonprofit called the Acoma Project where we focus on the same things. And one of the things we say at the Acoma Project and that I reiterate in the book is that every young person deserves the opportunity to live authentically and unapologetically as the best version of themselves. And if we don't name and recognize and honor all these identities that every young person carries, I think we do them a disservice. And I think it prevents us from being able to connect with them because they're really approaching their lives from this perspective of all these aspects of my identity. So for me, it was important to really name it. And it was also really important to reflect it in the art that you see in the book. We have non-binary folks represented in the book. We have all different racial ethnic groups. Some folks look ethnically nebulous on purpose. But I think the idea is to say, each of us is bringing a unique set of experiences into our relationship to our mental health, into our relationship with our self-concept, our relationship with our families and communities. And so to honor that, we have to talk about all of those things and how all of those things may create slightly different experiences for how people experience the world, what kind of trauma they experience, and then what kind of supports they need to help them with their mental health.
Yeah. Well, that was the thing in the book, the one thing that I did, one of those exercises in the toolkit, which really made me stop and think. You have that, write down I think it was write down the 12 descriptions of yourself. I mean, female, whatever it is, trans, or whatever your thing is, right? And then after that, and that really made me stop and think about, well, who I am and where I'm coming from. The next part of that, wasn't it? It was you had to write down you had to continue with that and then label what's the most important, what describes you the most, or what would you, the most important descriptions of 1, 2, 3. Yeah. It really And
so that section, I am so grateful that you were able to take the time and look at that. And that's very meaningful to me that you had the opportunity to do that and that there was something about it that gave you time to think and to pause a little bit. And we call that section the mosaic of identity. And that's one of the most beautiful things. I mean, I love the book overall, but that idea of the mosaic of identity is, the way we illustrate it in the book is we have a bunch of like library books and they're in a cube. And each one of those library books is a part of our identity. So as you said, so for me, I'm a woman, I'm African American, I'm Gen X, I'm from the South. I think it's the South. People quibble about whether Virginia is the South or not. I grew up
coming from Maine, Virginia is the South. I have to tell you.
There you go. There you go.
Yeah.
And all of those things really impact who I am and how I experience the world. I was a smart kid. I was an honor student. So I think when we take the time to think about all those parts of our identity, and then we think about which part of me sort of shows up the most for me? Which part of me feels the most salient all the time? And if a young person is queer, let's say a young person is trans, as you mentioned, if that young person is trans, that might be, for a time in their life, the single most important part of their identity. So we want to honor that. And that is part of self-discovery. So that whole idea of the mosaic of identity is to get us to just take a step back, stop going, and slow down and really think about, who am I? What's important to me? Because when you start there, then you have a better sense of how things like anxiety, depression, trauma, PTSD, acute trauma, chronic trauma, you really have a little bit more insight into why you might be experiencing some of those things and other people might not. So I really love that you had an opportunity to look at that exercise in the mosaic of identity.
Oh, yeah. And I took it very seriously. I was thinking about, growing up, and I just mentioned Maine, growing up in Maine as a Jew in the 50s and not being, you talk
Mm.
about identity, you have to be successful, you have to work hard, but don't be too Jewish.
That's
That's what,
it.
yeah. So,
Yes.
yeah. And that carried through in a lot of, anyway, I'm not going to go into my whole history, but yeah. And it's like, and that was critical in terms of forming my identity.
Oh yes, and it
Yeah.
shaped you, right? Like,
Yeah.
so
Right.
don't be too much of who you are. Think about
Right.
what that means. One is protective because you know what happens when in the 50s, you knew what it meant to show too much of who you were as a Jewish woman, right?
Right.
Or a Jewish
Exactly.
girl.
Girl. Yeah.
Yes, as a Jewish girl, and how people were going to respond to that. So when you're carrying that around with you, of course, that's going to contribute to some of the struggles or some of the challenges that you have. But I want people to understand. I want that little Jewish girl in the 50s from Maine to understand some of that had nothing to do with who you are. It had to do with the world around you and how the
Yeah.
world around you was
Viewed
not
you.
receptive. That's
Mm-hmm.
right. And they weren't taking care of you. And so we're going to help you unpack that. Not just you, but anybody who reads the book. I want them to unpack that so that they understand, oh, that worry about standing out too much. I can trace that right back to that little girl who was really wanting to fit in and not wanting to have to deal with anti-Semitism and that type of thing. So you nailed it. You got it.
Yep. And it also fits, I think this is another part of it, being female, being a woman,
Oh,
because
yes.
some of those issues definitely come up. Don't be smart, do this,
Yep.
but, not too aggressive, not too, otherwise or not, yeah, you don't want to be too strong. You have
Yep.
to kind of hold back. So that whole female thing comes into play.
100%. And I think for so many young women, the idea of it's that whole Barbie monologue with
Yeah.
America Ferrera, right? Like that, I think that's why that resonated with so many women and girls around the world. Because it was like, well, you can be assertive, but not too assertive because then you're aggressive. We want you to pay attention to what you look like physically, but not too much because then you're vain. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
We want you to care about what you look like, but not too much because you attract too much attention. So it's really trying to navigate all those things and figuring out a set of tools that allows you to put that stuff down, right? Like that is not your burden to carry. And so how do we help ourselves get out of that idea that other people's perceptions of us are our responsibility? They're not. And when we allow too many other perceptions to impact us, as we're saying, particularly as women, it can paralyze us because you don't know which way to turn. But if you recognize through taking care of your mental health that none of that is your stuff, you give yourself the freedom to start to put those things down and to start to allow who you are to emerge. And those are the things that help you navigate the issues related to depression and anxiety and trauma and those kinds of things.
What do you think the most salient probably issues are for the boys? Okay, we're just talking about the girls, like,
Yeah.
um, not too pretty, not too aggressive, all those kinds of things. Okay, so what about the boys, the young boys? What do they
I
wrestle
think,
with?
I
Generally
think,
speaking, obviously.
oh yeah, I think boys wrestle with the idea of what does it mean to be male? What is masculinity, right? So there's a Professor G, who's out there has a new book talking about all of these things. And I think what makes it slightly different for boys is there's a certain set of expectations for what it means to be male. And I think a lot of those expectations that other people put on boys, I think can put boys in a box. It's not the same kind of box that girls find themselves put in, but it's a box nonetheless. So what does it mean to be a man if you're not the primary breadwinner when you are dealing with women who through loads of different movements and lots of different activity may be competing with you for jobs? Or what does it mean if you find a partner and your partner is the primary breadwinner and she's female and you're the male and you've been taught the man is supposed to bring home the bacon? I think those are some of the challenges. I think there's also this whole idea of how do you engage women, right? So we talk about lots of the, what is it called, the manosphere, and how
Yeah.
that's sort of sucking a lot of these boys in, and hyper masculinity and toxic masculinity. And so really, helping boys understand that there's a way to engage and relate to women, the women in their lives, women they might want to date, women they might want to have platonic friendships with, that I think too many of our young men have not been given the tools to navigate well. They also haven't been given the tools to interrogate some of these things. And so when they start to ask questions, what is the fear? The fear is you're going to be labeled weak. The fear is you're going to be labeled with a slur, towards your masculinity. And so it's a challenge for them to really figure out, well, what does it mean to be a man in this day and age? What does it mean to be a boy? What is healthy boyhood? What is healthy manhood? And so I think some of our young men, many of them globally, are struggling with some of these same things as it relates to their maleness and what it means to be a boy or a man.
Yep. I just went to recently a dance recital for grandchildren. They're young, the kids, they're elementary school, they're dancers, boys. And this went through age 8 to 18. And in the younger classes at this recital, you see boys and girls. But as the classes get older and older, by the time the kids are in high school, they're all girls. All the
That's right.
boys, there are no, there, I think there was one boy, one kid,
Mhm.
and that was it. The rest were all girls.
That's right. That's right. Because what does it mean to wear the kind of clothes that you wear when you dance? What does it mean to tap into that, right? Because it's all yin and yang, masculine and feminine. What does it mean to lean into the feminine parts of yourself when you're a male? What does it mean to have that kind of ability to express yourself in a world that really tries to stick you in a box and tell you there's only one way to be a male? So it's just like you said. And how many boys have we lost the ability to see, the next Mikhail Baryshnikov or the next Gregory Hines,
Yeah.
because they're afraid of how they're going to be judged for being in that field. So you're absolutely right.
So what do we do? With your book, we don't have that many. We have a few minutes left,
Yeah.
and boy, this book is just packed with so much. And I mean, we've covered just a small, I think, portion of the book, right?
Yes,
So
yes,
yeah,
yes.
yeah,
So I think what we do is we encourage everybody, go out and buy the book, right? The reason the book is as small as it is and is as short as it is, about 160 pages, is because I want it to be an entry point. This is just a starting point. But once you get the book, I want parents and caregivers to sit down with their young people and work some of those activities and exercises that you mentioned. Because not only will it help the child, it will also help that parent or caregiver. It also is there to build the relationship between the two. It's there to help them find ways to communicate without kind of staring at each other and doing the thing that we do as parents and grandparents. How was your day?
yeah.
Fine. Conversation's over. Do you know what I mean? And
Right.
then go to
Yes.
the companion website, book.dralfie.com, watch the videos, talk about them, use the downloadable exercises, and that's an entry point. That's a way for parents and caregivers and our young people to begin the conversation.
And I'm sure you bring this toolkit into schools, I would assume.
Yes, we encourage schools, community centers, anybody where they're working with young people. We encourage them to grab this book. You can use it in group activities. You can use it individually. You can hand it out to a kid and let them work on it because it's a safe space for them. And so absolutely, any place there are kids, we want this book to be.
Yeah, and it's doable, like you said. It's not sometimes you get these books and they're volumes of stuff, and then people just, well, they put it down and they're not going to read it. But
Yeah.
this is not that. This is really, it's very simple, compact, but it's packed with all kinds of, as we say, the tools for mental health for all of us, not just for youth, but
Yes,
for the caregivers as well,
that's right. That's
right?
right. Absolutely. You got it. You nailed it. Thank you so much for summarizing it so well.
And okay, so just tell us any websites that
Yeah.
we can go to, other platforms to find out, because I mentioned several things that you were also ongoing projects that you're doing.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. So couple, dralfie.com, dralfiee project.com, Acoma Project, A-A-K as in kite, O-M-A, project, all one word, .org. So you got dralfie.com, Acoma Project, and then book, B-O-O-K, dralfie.com. You can buy the book there, but that's also the companion website with loads of activities and tools and journaling exercises, all kinds of stuff that you can get. And then I'm on all socials at DRAL, F as in Frank, IEE. That's me on pretty much every social except TikTok.
Okay. You're everywhere. Dr. Alfie Breland Noble, thanks so much for being on the show. Title of the book, Rise and Thrive, a mental health workbook for youth and for the young person inside all of us. Thank you so much. Great conversation.
Thank you.
Yeah.